My husband's best friend bet him I would cry when he handed me divorce papers at Christmas dinner. Women are so predictable, he laughed. They didn't know I was in the hallway holding a tray of spiced wine, feet frozen, pulse thudding in my ears. Brandon's voice followed low and smug. She'll crumble. Women always do. That was 5 days before Christmas, before the table was set, before the candles were lit, before anyone noticed I had changed. I stood there breathing slow, the tray shaking just enough to spill a drop. I didn't cry. Not then, not ever. Because this story didn't begin with a bet or a signature, it began long before in smaller ways with quieter wounds, and I had already decided how this one would end. It always started with laughter. That was the trick. You know, I could leave you tomorrow. Right, Brandon would joke at dinner parties, his hand resting on my shoulder, his voice warm, almost playful. Everyone laughed. So did I. But something in my chest tightened like a thread pulling behind my ribs. They thought it was harmless. A husband teasing his wife. They didn't see how often it happened, how easily he said it, how casually it slipped into conversation. They didn't hear the silence afterward, the way I stared into my wine glass trying to swallow something down, the first time I brushed it off, the fifth time I memorized it. No one noticed when I stopped wearing red, or how I glanced at him before I spoke in public. I didn't realize it either, not then, because control doesn't always feel like a fist. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. At first I defended him. He's just sarcastic. I told Jenny, my best friend since we were 12. He doesn't mean it like that. She didn't look convinced. He doesn't have to mean it, she said quietly. You look like you're disappearing. Maybe I was. I stopped posting online, stopped going to book club, let calls from my sister go unanswered. My world became smaller, not by accident, by habit. Everything began to orbit around Brandon, his moods, his schedule, his preferences. He never yelled, never raised a hand. He didn't need to. Don't embarrass me. You're lucky I'm still here. What else would you do without me? Each line coded in a chuckle like sugar over rust. I laughed back, just like I was supposed to. Smiling became a reflex, something I did with my face, not my heart. And slowly I forgot what I looked like without him. Brandon liked control, not the loud kind, the kind you can deny with a smile. When my mother visited, he mentioned the dirty kitchen loud enough for her to hear. When I forgot the dry cleaning, he muttered useless, just soft enough to pretend I imagined it. He never touched me in anger, never screamed, but every word was a pin pushed deeper just beneath the skin. Still, I told myself this was marriage. Not a fairy tale, but stability. At least he wasn't cheating. At least he wasn't violent. At least that word kept me still, kept me swallowing pain like medicine I didn't choose. But something in me was beginning to shift. Not loudly, not yet. Just a quiet awareness that I was shrinking to fit a space I no longer belonged in. It happened at a company gala. 2 glasses of champagne and Brandon leaned close, eyes glazed, voice low. You're just like the rest, he muttered, watching a woman walk by. Always wanting more, always clinging, needy. My hand froze on my glass. My face didn't move. I'd trained it well by then. No reaction, no mistake. I didn't ask what triggered it. I never did anymore. Later that night, he slammed the door behind him, headed straight for the liquor cabinet. I followed, quietly poured him another drink, handed it over with a practiced smile. You always joke about leaving, I said softly. Maybe we should sign something just in case. He laughed, deep, careless, cruel. You think I need a prenup to protect my fantasy football winnings? Then he grabbed a napkin, scrawled his signature with a flourish, and passed out on the couch. By morning, he forgot, but I didn't. He left the napkin on the table, crumpled beside his empty glass. I picked it up with steady hands. His name, the date, no hesitation. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just folded it once then again and placed it in my purse. The next day, Jenny met me at a notary office downtown. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a pen. I signed. They stamped. It was official. We made copies. I scanned one to a private email Jenny had created for me years ago, just in case. At home, I cooked dinner like always. Brandon told jokes about his coworkers. I laughed at the right parts, cleared the dishes, wiped the counter. He didn't notice how I looked at him that night, not with fear, not with anger, but with calculation. Something shifted after that. Not loudly, not all at once, but I started keeping a journal, not the pretty kind with gold lettering or hopeful quotes, just a plain spiral notebook tucked beneath my side of the mattress. I recorded everything. The way he rolled his eyes when I spoke, the dates he came home late, the smell of perfume I didn't wear. I wasn't planning anything, Not yet. But when he told a group of interns that my hobby was overspending, I didn't cry. I excused myself, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "He thinks I'm soft." And he was right. I had been. But that softness was starting to harden quietly, carefully. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not yet. I was learning how to survive without making noise. It was laundry day when I found the receipt. 2 wine glasses, 1 hotel room, strawberries from room service, dated Valentine's Day. He said he'd been out of town for work. I nodded back then. I believed him back then. Now I scanned it, saved it, logged it in the journal under evidence, not emotions. There was no confrontation, no yelling, just silence and documentation. At dinner that night, he told me, "If we ever split, you'll be crawling back. You can't even fix the Wi-Fi without me." I smiled, poured him another glass of wine. "You're probably right," I said, but I no longer believed it. There's a kind of silence that grows in a house like ours, not peace, but pressure, the kind that hums through every wall waiting to snap. And I was done pretending not to hear it. The night it broke was quiet. I woke from a dream where Brandon's voice echoed, "You'll have nothing." I sat up in the dark chest-tight sheets, damp with sweat. But something in me whispered, "That's not true anymore." I had the napkin, the notarized document, the emails, the receipts, the journal, and I had time. That was the night I stopped hoping he would change. From that moment on, I wasn't his wife. I was his shadow, polite, polished patient. I matched his tone. I praised his wine. I played the part he wanted to believe in. He thought I was healing. What he didn't see was that I was sharpening. He forgot you can only press someone down for so long before they learn how to rise without noise. And I had learned exactly where to stand when I was ready to jump. Segment 10, The Legal Edge. Jenny read the document again, her brow, low lips pressed. "He signed this?" she asked. I nodded once. She leaned back in her chair, glasses sliding into place. "He gave you the knife," she said softly. "You're just deciding when to use it." I didn't smile. I wasn't proud. I was tired, but steady. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just want to feel safe." "You will," she promised. "But we're going to make this ironclad." We added an addendum. Clarified, vague language. Built-in protections, financial, emotional, legal. Jenny worked like a surgeon. Clean, quiet, exact. By the time we finished, the document wasn't just protection, it was a blueprint. He thought he'd win because he had surprise, but surprise only works on the unprepared, and I wasn't that woman anymore. That night, I came home to Brandon on the couch, beer in hand, football on the screen. He didn't look up when I walked in. I paused at the doorway, watching him laugh at a replay like the world still belonged to him. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. He grunted, still staring at the TV. That was the start of my performance. I became the wife he bragged about, polished, pleasant, predictable. When he mocked my spending in front of friends, I laughed. When he toasted himself at a work party, I kissed his cheek and smiled bright. He thought I had softened. He didn't see I was learning to move in silence. I stopped correcting his lies, stopped reacting to his cruelty. He thought the fire in me had gone out. What he didn't know was that I had turned it inward into fuel. Brandon started to relax again. He thought he'd won. He thought the silence meant surrender, so he got sloppy. He came home late, with no excuse. Left his phone face up on the counter. Messages blinked across the screen, numbers without names, words without shame. One from me read, "Tonight. Same hotel." He left for the gym. 10 minutes later, I opened our shared laptop, synced his phone to my private cloud folder, took screenshots, forwarded everything to Jenny's email. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't feel anything really. Instead, I made lasagna, his favorite. When he got home, the house smelled warm. He kissed my cheek, told me I was glowing. I smiled, and served him every lie with a side of Parmesan. He ate like nothing had changed, but everything had. A few weeks later, we hosted a barbecue. Friends laughed near the grill. Brandon's best friend Nate stood beside him, beer sloshing as he spoke. "She'll fall apart if you leave her man. Too dependent. You've got it made." I was 10 feet away arranging fruit on a platter. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, I placed the strawberries in a spiral, one perfect red slice at a time. Brandon joined me, wrapped his arm around my waist, kissed my cheek. "You look beautiful today," he said. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, smiling just enough. He thought I had melted again, returned to him, but I was documenting everything. The words, the touches, the assumptions. He believed he owned the story. He didn't know I was already rewriting the ending. The day after the barbecue, I started recording calls. Not all of them, just the ones that mattered. The late night slips, the careless words, the laughter that turned cold. I labeled each file by date, stored them on a hidden drive. Organized, meticulous. It felt strange at first, like spying on my own life, but I wasn't seeking revenge. I was building a parachute, quietly, carefully. When you live in a house full of cracks, you don't wait for it to collapse. You learn where to step and when to jump. I bought a planner. Marked days with symbols and X for his late nights, a dot for provable lies, a star for anything that might matter later. To anyone else, it looked like grocery lists and meal plans. To me, it was a map. Eventually, I stopped reacting at all. No more questions, no more flinches, no more searching his face for signs of warmth that were never coming back. I became a mirror, reflecting only what he wanted to see. A quiet wife, a soft smile, an easy life. He believed I had finally learned my place. He believed he was untouchable again, so he got bold. He left cash on the counter more than usual, made larger withdrawals, went on business trips with luggage too neat for video calls. One day, I found a lipstick-stained receipt folded in his jeans. The shade was called Tempress Red. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't hurt. I made a note, because when the moment came, I didn't want fire. I wanted facts, and I was almost ready. The final confirmation came 2 weeks before Christmas. Brandon had a few drinks, fell asleep on the couch, his phone unlocked screen glowing in the dark. A message lit up. She doesn't suspect a thing. I'll file on Christmas. Want front row seats. There was a laughing emoji, a gif of a woman crying. My fingers didn't tremble. My stomach didn't turn. I read it twice. Screenshot, email, delete, gone from his phone, but safe in mine. That night, I lay beside him in bed. He snored softly, completely unaware. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about turkey, cranberries, candles. He thought I would break in front of an audience. He thought pain would make a show of itself, but he forgot something. When you hand someone a knife, you don't get to act surprised when they learn how to use it. Christmas came and the house looked perfect. Garland on the windows, candles flickering, the roast turkey steaming beneath his carving knife. Brandon grinned like the proud provider. He wore the maroon sweater I bought him, the one with reindeer stitched across the chest. His parents talked about retirement. My sister poured spiced wine. Laughter circled the table. I moved among them, refilling glasses, smiling with my mouth, but not my eyes. Beneath the table, my legs trembled, not with fear, with anticipation. Tonight, Brandon caught my eye while slicing the turkey. He winked. I matched his smile with one of my own, soft, unreadable. "Best bird yet," his father said, chewing with joy. "She's had practice," Brandon replied, placing the platter like a trophy. "Well, here's to 8 more Christmases," he added. "Or however many we last." Everyone laughed. So did I. As plates emptied and the room settled into a warm buzz, Nate leaned over and whispered something into Brandon's ear. Tipsy, grinning, confident. Brandon nodded, stood up slowly, tapped his glass with a butter knife. Before dessert, he said, "I've got a little something for my lovely wife." I glanced at my sister. She smiled, expecting a necklace. A letter, something sweet. Brandon reached into his blazer, pulled out a plain white envelope. No ribbon, no card. He placed it in front of me like a prize he was proud to give. "Merry Christmas, babe," he said, smirking. A quiet chuckle escaped Nate. No one else laughed. The envelope looked out of place, thin sharp at the edges, heavy in a way paper shouldn't feel. I held it for a breath, then opened it, calmly. The room went quiet as my eyes scanned the page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed, already filed. He had even highlighted a section like a student showing off his work. I looked up. Brandon's smile was wide, expectant, triumphant. So I smiled back. Soft, sweet. "Thank you," I said. His brow twitched, confused. Then I reached into my clutch, pulled out a silver pen, clicked it once, signed, dated, capped the pen, pushed the envelope back toward him. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I replied. He blinked. His smirk faltered. Nate shifted in his seat. Without another word, I reached under the table and placed a gold-wrapped box between Brandon's plate and his ego. "What's this?" he asked. "Your real gift," I said. Brandon hesitated, then tore at the wrapping quick, careless. Inside a leather folder. He opened it, read the first line, and the color drained from his face. His lips parted slightly, reading, rereading, dated, notarized, undeniable. It was the agreement he'd signed nearly a year ago, the one I'd had notarized, the one he laughed through, drunken, arrogant. "What is this?" Nate asked, leaning in. Brandon didn't answer. So I did. "It's the prenup. Updated, reinforced, and filed." Brandon blinked hard, gripping the folder. "I filed first," he muttered, as if that could rewrite truth. "Which makes it binding," I said, voice even. "Under your terms. Every asset, every clause. You gave it to me." He looked stunned, the weight of it hitting all at once, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my purse again, pulled out a smaller envelope, thinner, lighter. I placed it gently on the table beside the folder, beside his pride. Brandon stared at it like it might explode. He opened it slowly, fingers stiff, face pale. Inside was a single photo, black and white, blurry, but unmistakable. A sonogram. He looked at it, then at me. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice calm, certain. 8 weeks today. For a moment his expression cracked a flicker of something human, but it faded. Prenup, pregnancy, custody, consequences. It all collided behind his eyes too fast to catch. "You planned this," he whispered. I met his gaze, steady, unblinking. "No," I said. "You bet I'd cry. You laughed. You called me predictable." I leaned in slightly. "I didn't plan anything. I prepared." The table was silent, not stunned, shattered. The kind of quiet that creeps in when power changes hands. Brandon's mother pushed her chair back slightly, face pale. His father removed his glasses, cleaned lenses that weren't smudged. Nate opened his mouth, then closed it. The smirk was gone. My sister Beth reached under the table, found my hand. Her thumb brushed mine in steady, wordless support. Brandon stared at the sonogram still lying in his lap like it might vanish if he blinked. "I didn't," he started, but I straightened in my chair. "No, just one word. Firm, final." He blinked, unsure which version of me he was speaking to now. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice breaking slightly. I didn't look at him when I answered. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You already did." His phone buzzed against the wood of the table. Once. Then again. He picked it up slowly, thumb trembling, screen lighting his face with a pale, uneasy glow. He read the email. From Jenny. Subject line, prenup confirmation, legally binding. I watched him scroll, watched the blood drain from his cheeks. Metadata, timestamps, digital copies, all signed, all protected. He gripped the phone tighter as if it could reverse time. Another buzz, this one from his father's email. Subject, FWD signed prenup. FYI, the man he once mocked as old school had received the proof. Brandon lowered the phone, his hand now shaking. He looked at me like I was a stranger with a language he'd never learned. But I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped shrinking. I turned to Beth. Her eyes hadn't left me. "I could go for something sweet now," I said, almost cheerful. "Can you pass the pie?" "Which one?" she asked, recovering quickly. "Apple." "With whipped cream, please." She nodded, started slicing in silence. I stood, walked to the buffet, retrieved a clean plate. The room still hadn't moved. No one spoke. No one touched their glasses. Brandon sat flanked by the wreckage of his illusion, the prenup, the sonogram, the echo of a laugh he thought would last forever. I returned to my seat, placed the slice of pie in front of me, lifted my fork with steady hands. "I'll have the locks changed tomorrow," I said softly. He flinched, but I didn't look up. I took a bite. Warm cinnamon, flaky crust. Peace served in silence. Brandon pushed his chair back. The legs scraped the hardwood louder than his voice. "You think you've won," he said, almost spitting it. I didn't answer. He didn't deserve a reply. He stood there for a beat, searching for something to say. A weapon, a defense, a version of the story where he still came out on top, but there wasn't one. He looked down at the folder, the sonogram, the envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Then he turned, stormed out of the room, out of the house. He left everything behind: his pride, his plan, his final move. The door closed without drama. No slamming, just a click. For a second, no one breathed. Then Beth whispered, "I always hated that sweater." Laughter flickered, tentative, then real. I took another bite of pie and smiled. There were no fireworks, no shouting, no broken plates, just a slow unraveling of power, measured in glances, documents, and one quiet bite of pie. Beth stayed the night. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. "You're not waking up alone tomorrow," was all she said. We slept in the guest room, her hand brushing mine in the dark, wordless, warm. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath until that night. When I finally exhaled, it didn't feel like my own breath. It felt borrowed, like someone else's life. But the next morning, the house was still. No TV blaring, no footsteps above. Brandon was gone. No note, no call, just silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of it. I made myself breakfast. Toast, soft eggs, coffee, strong and quiet. I didn't worry about the clink of my fork, didn't listen for footsteps or shifting moods from the next room. By 9 a.m., I was on the phone with a locksmith. Emergency or standard, he asked. I paused. Standard, I said, then added, but make it fast. He came that afternoon, a kind-eyed man who didn't ask questions. I handed him Brandon's old keys. Make sure none of these work anymore. When he left, I stood in the foyer holding a single new key. Smooth, cold, completely mine. It wasn't the house I'd claimed that day. Not yet. It was the feeling, the certainty. For the first time in years, I owned something without fear. That evening, I moved into the master bedroom. It still smelled like him, expensive cologne, cold and clean, like something borrowed from someone else's life. I opened every window, let the December wind rush in, let it carry out the stale pieces of everything I'd endured in silence. I stripped the bed, bundled the sheets into trash bags, every pillowcase, every memory. In the back of the closet, I found a box of candles, sandalwood, the kind I used to love before he said they gave him headaches. I lit 3, watched the flames sway against the walls, soft and golden. They danced like something free, like something never meant to be hidden. That night, I slept diagonally across the bed because I could, because no one told me to stay small, and I didn't have to ask for space to take it anymore. His mail started arriving with red stamps screaming across the front. Final notice, past due, immediate action required. I stacked them neatly on the side table by the door. I didn't forward a single one. That evening, Jenny called. "You won't believe this," she said, barely containing a smile. "Actually, you will," Brandon's lawyer had called her. Apparently, his face said everything when he realized what I'd been sitting on. "Is it official?" I asked, blanket wrapped around my shoulders. "He lost 70% overnight," she replied, "and with a baby on the way," she paused. "He'll need a payment plan just to write the check." I didn't smile for the money, not even close. I smiled because I could sit in my own home on my own terms without bracing for war. His mail started arriving with red stamps screaming across the front. Final notice, past due, immediate action required. I stacked them neatly on the side table by the door. I didn't forward a single one. That evening, Jenny called. "You won't believe this," she said, barely containing a smile. "Actually, you will." Brandon's lawyer had called her. Apparently, his face said everything when he realized what I'd been sitting on. "Is it official?" I asked, blanket wrapped around my shoulders. "He lost 70% overnight," she replied. "And with a baby on the way," she paused. "He'll need a payment plan just to write the check." I didn't smile for the money, not even close. I smiled because I could sit in my own home on my own terms without bracing for war. "I'm proud of you," Jenny said quietly. That nearly broke me, not from pain but relief. "Thanks," I whispered, "for staying, even when I didn't know I needed someone. You've always been strong, Steph. You just finally believed it." The fallout came like melting snow, slow, quiet, unstoppable. Some friends unfollowed, a few picked sides, others sent texts laced with disclaimers. Not taking sides, but some messages were louder than words. A woman I hadn't spoken to in 2 years sent one line, "I wish I had your strength." A bouquet of peonies arrived without a name. The card read, "About time, Brandon's assistant." Of course she knew. In the office he once ruled, his swagger turned to silence. He left meetings early, missed deadlines. The man who said you'd be nothing without me was disappearing in real time. I started buying lavender soap again, the kind he said smelled too strong. I painted the nursery a soft sage green, even though he once called it a waste of time. I hung tiny string lights around the window just because they made me feel calm. There was a stuffed giraffe in the corner, its head slightly tilted like it was listening. Some nights I lit candles after dinner, drank tea in the sunroom, barefoot, unbothered. One evening, I caught myself humming while folding laundry. I hadn't done that since our second anniversary. I bought new bedsheets white with tiny gold stars. I slept diagonally again, arms stretched wide, because there was room now. Room for silence, room for softness, room for me. Peace wasn't loud, it was the absence of needing permission to exist. One afternoon, I saw him, Brandon, walking out of a bank phone pressed to his ear, expression tight. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and didn't know how to look. I didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't ache. I kept walking like I owed him nothing, because I didn't. Later that day, Jenny sent me a screenshot. Brandon's name had been removed from the company newsletter. No headline, no explanation, just gone. I replied with a single thumbs up emoji. Then I made tea, watched the curtains sway in the late afternoon light. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not even justice. It was about breathing freely in my own space, not rehearsing responses, not waiting for the door to slam, just living, and realizing finally that I was doing it on my terms. The first time I felt her kick, I was barefoot in the kitchen humming to an old Nina Simone record, slicing peaches for a pie. It was soft at first, a flutter like the brush of wings. I froze. Hands still sticky with juice blade mid-air. Then it came again, certain, alive. I dropped the knife, both hands to my stomach, eyes wide with wonder. It wasn't just movement, it was a message. You're not alone. She was real. She was strong. And so was I. Later that night, I opened my journal for the first time in weeks. I didn't write much, just one promise. This child will never hear yelling through a closed door. Never walk on glass, never mistake fear for love. I underlined it twice. This time we begin different. Elena moved in during my second trimester. 2 suitcases, a basket of lavender muffins, and her usual oversized hoodie. "I'm not letting you do this alone," she said, kicking off her sneakers at the door. "Also, someone needs to stop you from eating pickles with ice cream." We fell into rhythm almost instantly. She worked from the kitchen table, wore fuzzy socks in July, and never asked about Brandon unless I brought him up, which I rarely did. That part of my story was no longer worth retelling. Jenny came by often, arms full of groceries, baby name books, and casserole dishes marked with sticky notes. Page 37, do not name her Tiffany. Trust me. We laughed more in those months than I had in years. We didn't talk about court dates. We talked about crib colors and which stroller folded easiest with one hand. It was the first time silence felt safe to share. One quiet Sunday, I pulled a box from the back of the hallway closet. I knew what it was the moment I touched it, satin ribbon frayed at the edges, faint scent of cedar and old vows, our wedding photos. I sat on the living room floor, opened the lid. There we were. Posed smiles, tight embraces, eyes full of futures that never happened. I didn't cry, didn't even flinch. I slid each photo into a separate envelope, labeled the box to release. Then I drove to a donation center, handed it over without ceremony. No explanation needed. On the way home, I stopped at a bookstore, bought a leather journal with thick ivory pages. That night, I wrote on the first page plans that are only mine. Some entries were long. Others, just one word, but every one of them belonged to me. By the time Christmas came again, the air inside the house smelled like cinnamon and pine, not tension. The dining table was smaller now, cozy, no centerpieces arranged for performance, no wine glasses used as shields, just laughter, real laughter, the kind that bubbles up without fear. Beth brought her toddler, who dropped mashed potatoes on the floor and clapped like he'd done magic. My dad carved the turkey. Elena tried to make vegan gravy and failed loudly. Jenny came with a date, her first in a year, and for once, I didn't feel envy. I felt full. Beside my sister's son sat a brand new high chair, white with little yellow stars. Inside it sat the love of my life, my daughter. She had his eyes, maybe, but the rest, all mine. She babbled nonsense, hands waving as if she had something very important to say, and I believed her. I didn't spend the evening watching the door, didn't brace for comments dressed as jokes. I wasn't rehearsing answers in my head. I wasn't shrinking to avoid a sigh, a stare, a silence. I was present. Every bite, every laugh, every story passed like warm bread between friends. After dinner, I curled into the armchair by the fireplace. My daughter asleep on my chest, her tiny breath rising and falling against the fabric of my sweater. Everyone else had drifted into the kitchen or out for a walk. But I stayed, because the stillness no longer scared me. It wrapped around me like something earned, something sacred. I looked down at her, her fingers curled her mouth, twitching in sleep, and I whispered, He said I'd be nothing without him, then kissed her forehead. Turns out, I'm everything without him. There were no big moments after that, no dramatic scenes, just quiet, ordinary freedom. I drank my coffee hot, sang to the radio while cleaning the kitchen. No one corrected my tone. No one made me feel small for speaking at the wrong time. I wore pajamas on Sundays, didn't fold the laundry right away, let the baby nap on my chest as long as she wanted. Elena painted a mural on the nursery wall, a crooked moon with little stars that looked like fingerprints. Jenny dropped by with new books and old gossip. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. We didn't talk about Court, or him, or what he lost. We talked about first steps, soup recipes, what color to paint the front door. It wasn't the life I once dreamed of. It was better because it was mine. I saw him once more, months later, at the grocery store. He was alone, no ring, no cart, just a basket and a look he couldn't hide. He glanced up, paused, recognized me, but didn't smile. I nodded, polite, distant, then kept walking. I didn't check behind me, didn't wonder what he felt, didn't carry him with me when I left that aisle. Later, Jenny texted, "He's moving, out of the city, started over somewhere small." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. No reaction, no echo. I wasn't angry, wasn't proud, just done. Some stories don't end with revenge or regret. They end with a woman buying peaches, humming softly, and forgetting what it felt like to be afraid of coming home. I lit 3 candles that night, sandalwood like before, but this time the scent didn't have to hide. My daughter lay asleep in her crib, arms sprawled, mouth slightly open, safe in a world I built from the ground up. The house was quiet, not the tense kind, the full kind, the kind of silence that holds joy without needing to shout. I wrote in my journal before bed, 1 line, "She will grow up free." Then I closed the book, turned out the light, and let myself feel the weight of peace. Not because he was gone, but because I was here. Whole, strong, already enough. And somewhere between the first tear never cried and the final door closed, I didn't just survive, I began.